Apotheosis, Chapter 2, The Strategist. Alright, is everybody ready? Izuku asked with great enthusiasm. The group of criminals looked at him like he was crazy. They were about to rob a bank, not go to an amusement park. This kid was not at all what they had expected. Word had been spreading through the underground of an individual with a certain skill set. Villains had been hiring him to analyze the weaknesses of certain heroes and provide strategic planning for various crimes they wanted committed. He was apparently some kind of genius that worked for the highest bidder. No one knew his name, but he went by an alias called Apotheosis. A green-eyed, green-haired boy dressed in a white hoodie, dark gray pants, boots, black leather gloves, and wearing a black scarf around the lower half of his face to hide his more distinguishable features. The kid always seemed to have a sunny disposition with a bit of an awkward stutter. The criminals weren't one to complain, though. He did do good work. Alright, I don't know what else to say. Izuku chuckled, rubbing his head awkwardly. Good luck, everyone? Whatever, kid. One of the masked thugs rolled his eyes. This plan of yours better work. It will, Izuku said with complete confidence. He already helped 3 criminal groups knock over 6 different banks. This next one will be child's play. The men exited the black van while the green-haired boy stayed behind. He sat on a small office chair, and on his lap was a portable computer, which he paid for from one of his previous gigs. From the screen, he received live footage of the inside of the bank. Izuku had hacked into the security system and ran a virus that he created called the Phantom program. Basically, it took over the footage in all the cameras, looped whatever recording he wanted, and blocked the current feed. So, in other words, the thugs that hired him were completely invisible as they broke into the closed bank. The silent alarm was also deactivated. This is going very well, he mumbled into his headset while he watched them break open the vault. One of them had a magnetic quirk that allowed them to manipulate the tumblers and locks in the doors to open anything. Very handy for a bank robbery. 30 minutes later, they had all the money bagged and ready to be taken to the van. Izuku took a sip of his coffee. He timed everything perfectly, down to the last detail. Even this next part. Stop right there! The thugs froze when they heard a voice shout from the open entrance of the bank. Damn it! A hero! One of them growled. Standing out in the darkness was a relatively new hero, by at least 2 years. Called Flare, a hero with a quirk that covered his hands in fire and allowed him to throw fireballs that were small but fast. As I planned, Izuku said through the headset. You knew he would show up? The third criminal yelled into the mic. Of course! Izuku had planned exactly for this. He knew that this area was a sort of nexus point where heroes frequently patrolled. He analyzed their patrol patterns and picked this night specifically so that this particular hero would be there, rather than any of the others. You little brat! Another thug shouted through the mic. They pointed their guns at Flare just as the hero was about to launch some fireballs at them. Fire detected in the vicinity of the bank, Izuku said smoothly while pushing a button on his keyboard. The fire sprinklers suddenly activated, dousing the entire building in water and causing the hero's fire to fizzle out. With his abilities completely neutralized, one of the accomplices used his lower-level speed quirk to run up and knock Flare upside the head with his gun, rendering him unconscious. I thought you guys had more faith in me. You can trust that I won't set you up. Izuku chuckled. Of all the heroes that could have been patrolling the area, Flare had to have been the easiest to neutralize, by simply setting off the sprinkler system. Like you said, he planned this perfectly. Can you lock Flare in the vault, please, and gather up the bags? We have less than... Izuku examined his watch. 10 minutes before the firefighters arrive. Damn. I was really underestimating this kid, the man with the magnetic quirk said, sounding impressed. The other 2 were equally impressed. Apotheosis really was a genius to plan a heist like this. Job well done, everyone, Izuku smiled. A job well done. He was happy. With his cut, he would have enough to start getting his many projects going. The next morning, Izuku yawned as he finished counting his money. With his cut from the recent robbery, he now had a sizable fortune hidden under his bed. Izuku had been moving through the underground assisting criminals and villains, using his strategic mind and intellect to plan out their crimes and find weakness to heroes they battled. It was the only way he could get large amounts of money. After all, he couldn't go into the hero agencies and say that, "Hey, I'm a quirkless boy and I'd like to help." At best, he'd be told politely to leave. At worst, he'd be laughed out of the building. It's sad, but society didn't take quirkless people seriously. He wore a scarf over his face and went by an alias to hide his identity. He also covered his tracks well, so nothing could ever be traced back to him. Izuku spent all day sitting in class coming up with an alias, writing them down on a piece of paper until he finally picked the name Apotheosis. It meant the highest point of development, or someone's ascension into divine status. He liked those meanings, so that became his name. That, and it had a nice ring to it. Ever since his dreams to be a hero died, and his new dream to create a better hero society that didn't look down on the weak was born, he had begun working on blueprints for the key to accomplishing this. The Infinity Gauntlet, a device capable of granting Izuku not just a quirk, but multiple quirks. All the greatest quirks anyone had ever seen. The stones he needed to make would give him the powers he needed to create his new world. Firstly, Izuku needed to see if his theory in math was correct. He planned to build the machine he designed called the Forge. It was basically a big manufacturing engine that would extract the quirk genes from DNA and process it into a full, solid form. These stones would power the gauntlet and give Izuku the same abilities of those quirks. However, there was another problem he was dealing with right now. A machine as big as the Forge needed a lot of space. Where would he build it? He required a proper laboratory to work and build his devices. Deciding to think about this later, Izuku put on his school uniform. Today, he was going to take a step towards his goal. Nothing could ruin his day. Unless Kanchan decided to be a hot-headed jerk again today. Ever since he'd gotten taken hostage by that sludge villain, the ashy blonde boy became even more insufferable than he already was. Maybe the whole incident made him realize he wasn't as untouchable as he believed. How sad. The poor explosion boy wasn't strong enough to save himself from a weak sludge villain, Izuku thought sarcastically. That was nothing. Katsuki Bakugo didn't know what it truly felt like to be weak. Unfortunately for Izuku, and due to typical bullying philosophy, the incident made him seek to re-inflate his ego and feel superior again. The best way to do that? Continue picking on quirkless Deku, and Izuku had no choice but to sit there and take it. Heading to school, he yawned again. Last night's robbery lasted a little longer than he had thought. The thugs Izuku was working with wanted to count every cent of the money they stole so they could make sure everyone got an equal share, which took a good 3 hours to complete. By the end, Izuku was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Still, he was well enough to accomplish what he needed to accomplish today at the school. Bypassing his classroom, he walked down the hall to the principal's office. There he was told to report to room 305. At the request of his mother, he was given exclusive permission to take a test that would allow him to graduate middle school early. That was last week, and after getting a perfect score on the test, he was required to take an IQ test, along with a placement test today in room 305, that would determine which schools he could get into. Izuku was aiming for a certain boarding school across Tokyo that would require him to move away from home, but it would give him the fresh setting he desired. Plus, living alone would allow him to continue his projects in complete secrecy. A school day later, and he was finished. Izuku wasn't surprised that he was the only student taking the test. Not to insult the school, but it didn't possess the most intellectual individuals. Plus, not many knew that you could graduate early. Deciding not to dwell on it, since it was the last time he had ever set foot in this building, Izuku headed towards his former classroom to pick a few of his belongings. Class was over by the time he reached the room, and only a few of the students remained. But just his luck, one of the last people he needed to see was getting ready to leave. "What are you doing here so late, Deku?" Bakugo asked with a sneer. Izuku pursed his lips and chose to ignore him. Opening his desk, he grabbed his spare notebooks and a jump drive that he used to store ideas. "Hey! I asked you a question!" Stuffing his personal belongings in his backpack, Izuku made his way to the door, only to be stopped by a smoldering hand on his shoulder. "Don't ignore me, you piece of shit!" Izuku had to wipe a drop of spit that landed on his face from the blonde boy's barking. "I had just come to get my things," Izuku said in the meekest voice possible. "Best to continue being pathetic, that way they'll never see him coming." "Where were you?" Bakugo demanded. "Taking a test," Izuku responded with a timid expression. "What test?" "A test to see if I should graduate early." "You? What's so special about your quirkless ass that they would let you graduate earlier than me?" Finally having enough of this mock interrogation and pretending to be helpless, Izuku freed his shoulder and shuffled out the door. "I don't answer to you." The freckled boy glared at the other. Katsuki was actually taken aback by the glare. As far as he knew, Deku, the nerd, never gave him such a dark look before. In an effort to reassert his dominance, he followed after the green-haired boy. "UA doesn't take early graduates, Deku! So if you're trying to get in before me..." "I'm not going to UA." Izuku cut him off, making the other boy's eyes widen. "I rescinded my application. I decided to go to a boarding school on the other side of the city. We won't be meeting ever again. You got what you wanted, Kachan. Goodbye." He waved him off and walked out the school in an attempt to end whatever relationship they had once had, once and for all. "Hold on! Hold up, Deku!" Katsuki chased after him down the street. "What do you mean you're not going to UA?" Izuku sighed to himself and stopped to turn around. "Just what I've said. I've decided to stop trying to be a hero and be more realistic." He remembered that's what All Might said to him. Izuku couldn't wait to see the look on the number one hero's face when he showed him how realistic he planned on becoming. "So you finally realized you can never compete with me," Katsuki said smugly. "Compete with you? Your attitude, compiled with the collateral damage you could cause, could make you the worst hero ever," Izuku thought to himself. "Yep. I'm gonna try my hand at technology, and maybe I can build devices to help the police. It doesn't matter what you build. Anything you create, a hero could do 100 times better!" The explosion boy barked at him. "Oh, you just wait," he smirked internally. "Well, have a nice life, Kachan." And with that, Izuku walked away, and out of the other boy's life for good. Bakugo stood there, the shock that he'd never see Deku again. That he was gone forever, just like that, finally setting in. He honestly didn't know how to feel about it. After years of pushing the quirkless boy around, he didn't think the other would just up and leave like that. "Deku," he growled in frustration, choosing his default emotion, anger, as he stomped away. That night... There we go. Izuku smiled as he finished soldering the wires and circuit boards together for his first device. One of his jobs that involved smuggling illegal equipment allowed him to get a hold of a piece of technology that was used in prisons to keep villains contained. A device normally attached to turrets that detected the activation of a quirk. With a few modifications, he made a smaller version that he could wear on the side of his head, with a single lens that Izuku took from a pair of red aviator sunglasses, covering his eye almost like a monocle. The device's main purpose was to detect a nearby quirk user, project a number on the lens that represented the level of power, 1 through 100, and record it. He named it the Scouter, after the same fictional gadget that inspired it from a manga that Izuku read called Dragon Ball. Time to test it. Izuku smiled as he hooked the Scouter around his ear. The red transparent lens covered his left eye, leaving him with complete visibility. Pushing one of the small buttons on the clip behind his ear, he activated it. The freckled boy stared at the lens as it booted up. Pushing the second button, he finally got the numbers he was looking for. Let's see who's around. The nearest person was a quirk level of 7. That must be Mom. Izuku widened the range of pressing a few more buttons, making a mental note to upgrade the Scouter to a hands-free version, recording all the quirk users in the apartment building. Looks like I'm not so useless, after all, Izuku chuckled, proud of his first invention. Elsewhere. So who is this guy again? Shigaraki Tomura demanded. He goes by the name Apotheosis. He's a young, up-and-coming villain, kind of like you. Kirigiri explained, looking over the folder of information that Sensei acquired. He assists villains and criminals by planning out their crimes. He's very strategic. He can't be very good if I haven't heard of him, the light blue-haired teen argued, sitting hunched over at the bar. He recently began. Since then, he has been involved with over 20 acts of villainy, and every one of them was a complete success, the black misty man said. Not a single failure? Shigaraki questioned, mildly surprised. 10 robberies, 6 assaults on heroes, transportations of illegal weapons and technology, and various other crimes have not been made public yet. Kirigiri sounded impressed. He's just what this league needs, a voice on the monitor screen behind them said, gaining their immediate attention. A true strategist will help us achieve our goals. Find him, Kirigiri, the mystery man ordered. All right, then. Let's send him an invitation. Kirigiri warped away to meet a few contacts that could put him in touch with Apotheosis.